Well, joining me now from the University of Otago, expert in international relations, Dr. Robert Patman. Robert, on the surface, he backs the UN peace plan. In reality, though, that's obviously not happening. When does the rest of the world finally lose patience with Bashar al-Assad?
Oh, good evening, Greg. This is a crucial meeting in Geneva because I think the Annan peace plan is hanging by a thread, and this is the last chance to give it some meaning. Since the Annan peace plan was introduced in April the 12th, it's failed to deliver a ceasefire, and Kofi Annan has asked for this meeting in Geneva to try to get that plan back on track. And in particular, he's pushing for an element of the peace plan which hasn't got much air so far, which is the idea of a gradual political transition. Mr. Annan believes that Mr. Assad will have to stand down as part of that transition. The signs are, in the build-up to the meeting, the Russians are not going to agree to that.
I was just going to ask you that. How important a factor in this is Russia sort of lessening its stance?
Well, I think Russia is a source of frustration to the West. But on the other hand, Russia itself is facing very tough choices now because it desperately wants the Annan peace plan in place. Because if that collapses, if they can't reach agreement at Geneva to keep the peace plan in place in some shape or form, then there'll be no diplomatic cover for the Russian position in relation to Syria. In other words, the pressures for external intervention with the Annan peace plan in tatters will absolutely increase. And Turkey in particular has recently been involved in an incident with Syria. This is not just an internal conflict, it has the potential to spread externally, and Russia knows that unless the UN is involved, the chances of external actors getting involved will accelerate rapidly.
We saw Hillary Clinton in that track. There's been a lot of sabre rattling from the US about the killing in Syria. What does it need to go beyond just being noise?
Well, I think, Hillary Clinton has said 3 or 4 times that Russia is on the verge of ditching Mr. Assad. There was speculation again in the build-up to this meeting in Geneva. The Russians were not wedded to Mr. Assad. That remains to be seen. What the Russians are holding out, the Russians seem to agree in principle to the idea of a gradual political transition. But unlike the Western countries, the United States and indeed the UN itself, they believe Mr. Assad should form part of any interim national coalition government. And that's completely unacceptable to the opposition figures in Syria and also unacceptable to the United States, and I think also unacceptable to the UN leadership.
On the face of it, Bashar al-Assad, compared to all the leaders we've seen fall over the past 18 months or so, is something quite different. He's almost moderate in appearance. There's no outrageous military uniforms, no ranting, no flaunting of any huge wealth. To a degree, does that make it harder for the West to sort of demonise and make him that marked man?
No, I think appearances can be deceiving, Greg. Did you notice in that clip of interview that your viewers just saw that he did say all terrorists should be annihilated? Now, he defines terrorists as basically much of the domestic opposition to his leadership. So I don't think we should have... I think the UN has lost any illusions about Mr. Assad. The massacres continue. He has used force against unarmed protesters at the beginning, and of course they became armed protesters now, which has been a sort of grim self-fulfilling prophecy on the part of Mr. Assad.
We also heard there that he's prepared to sort of fight to the bitter end. In Bashar al-Assad's world, what is the bitter end? What will that entail?
Well, he seems to think they can still prevail. But, there are the signs. Being the head of a dictatorship, or being the dictator, he has to talk confidently, Greg, because if he shows signs of losing confidence, all those people who work around him, whose careers depend on him, could jump ship. So he's got to talk in a bold, confident tone. I think all the signs are that the regime is doomed. Economically, the situation is getting worse by the day. And there's also disturbing signs, at least disturbing from Mr. Assad's point of view, the opposition is getting more and more arms. In other words, he could lose militarily. Russia, as I said, faces very tough choices in the near future.
So much hope, as we said before, pinned on Geneva. Realistically, how do you think this is going to play out from here?
Very difficult to say. The signs don't look promising. It just depends on the cost-benefit analysis that the Russian leadership are going through, they may decide at the last moment that they have to support some sort of political transition, even if it means sacrificing Mr. Assad, in order to retain some sort of influence in Syria.
All right, for the very last time, thank you for that, Robert, from the University of Otago, Professor Robert Patman.
Thank you, Greg.